Hello, I'm Julia Hankins, and today I'm going to be talking all about what to do when children are demanding our attention and wanting to go first and struggling with turn taking and all of those things that can make our jobs as wellbeing practitioners really, really tricky. So sometimes we have children in our classes who find it difficult or more difficult than most to take turns in a game or to wait for something to happen or to accept that other people have got the toy or the object or the card that they wanted. And that can be really tricky for us to manage. And it can really knock us off our confidence when a child is making a scene or seeming really angry about something. And so sometimes then we can fall into patterns of managing it in a way that perhaps our parents would have managed that kind of thing. And so today I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, because in quite a lot of my classes I've had children who experience this, and yeah, there's some things I'm not 100% like, oh, I do this brilliantly and these are all the tools. No, obviously there are still days when I've not handled something as well as I wish I would, but there are some things in my times, both in my 20 years of being a teacher, or more than 20 years now of being a teacher, and also the past 8 years of working with children as a children's yoga teacher and mindfulness teacher. There's some things that I've learned that have worked, and I wanted to share them with you now. So firstly, I think it can be a tricky concept because we want to ensure that everybody in our class is happy and comfortable, and everybody has we don't want anyone to be really upset. We don't want anybody to feel like they're not getting the thing that they want. But we're also not wanting to appear to reward poor behavior or ignore good behavior. And I do the little quotations there, because it's not necessarily about what's good behavior and what's poor behavior. And my first point is to understand what's going on here. And so sometimes the children who are behaving in this way or presenting in this way have something that can be regarded as PDA. Now, PDA is commonly referred to as pathological demand avoidance. However, I prefer the term persistent desire for autonomy, because I feel like that's less judgmental. I think it better explains what's going on for the child. These children have a really strong desire for autonomy over their bodies, over their choices, over what's happening for them, and they struggle when that decision or that choice has been taken away from them. And really, we can think as adults looking on that, oh, that child's just making a fuss, or they're just having a tantrum, or they just only want things their way, or they're just selfish. It can be really easy to put those judgments on a child, but actually that's not really what's going on. And I think it's really important that we understand that what's happening here is that child is really dysregulated. They are not choosing that behavior. Nobody would choose to be that upset about something. They're just genuinely upset. They're dysregulated. And so what they need is our help and support to regulate. They do not need guilt or shame or fear to make them conform. And so sometimes we need to figure out what it is that instigates these behaviours, and kind of limit them and help the child within the moment as well. And so that could mean communicating more with the child themselves, with any teachers that may be around if you're working in a school, or with parents or carers, if that's possible for you, to chat through what the main issues are, and see if you can figure out when these events occur and if there's any particular pattern to it. So that's the first thing, is understand what's going on for the child and kind of reframe in your mind that they are struggling too. They're having a hard time. They're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. So the second thing that I would say is really important here, or that I've found to be important, is building trust. So if we invest in a relationship with this child, then they're more likely to trust what you say. So, for example, there's children who I teach now who, when I first started teaching them, they would get really upset if I was to say, it's you're going to have a turn, but it's not your turn right now. You're going to have a turn at this point. Um, they wouldn't believe that. Whereas now they've got a relationship with me and they know that I do what I say. And so they trust more. And so it happens less where they will be really dysregulated because they trust, okay, you've said I'm going to have a turn. And so I'm likely to have a turn. And for some children, just that trust in you will reduce that because they'll believe that what you say is true. Not all children, but for some children, that will really help. And so, yeah, so for this, to build trust, I often make extra time for particular children. And so that could be that when I'm setting up, for example, at the moment, there's one particular school where I set up in the morning while the children are walking through the hall. And quite often, the children that struggle with dysregulation around these kind of issues will come and chat to me. It's just a really common thing. I'm just like attracting them. And I've noticed that the more I talk to them during these little incidental times, the more that builds trust and that more that builds a relationship with them and makes my life easier and makes their life easier too. And so the third thing that I would say has really helped me in this situation is to really use the language of fairness. And so often children who struggle with these kind of difficulties also, combined with that, have a really strong sense of justice and a fairness. Although you may not fully understand their interpretation of justice and fairness, it's likely that they themselves really understand when something is fair or when something is unjust according to their rules that are happening within them. And so if you make it really clear how you're being fair, then that will help them understand the situation. And so making it really explicit about how you're being fair. And so this brings me on to point number 4, which is to create strategies. So just to recap, I've talked about understanding the child's perspective. That was number 1. Building trust through relationship. That's number 2. Using the language of fairness. That's point number 3. And we're on to number 4, which is creating strategies that work for everyone. And so what this looks like for me is managing expectations of the children in my class. So if not everybody's going to get a chance to pick a card that day or pick from a bag that day, then I will say not everybody's going to get a chance today. So they know I might not get choice today. And then I will say, but what I'm going to make sure what I'm going to make sure of is that you will get a turn and it will happen. And this is how I'm going to do it. And so I'll make it really explicit. So what I tend to do is have a little list and I write down who's picked from the bag or from the who's had a turn of showing something or whatever the thing is. If not everybody's going to get a turn doing that thing, I will write down who has had a turn. And I'm very explicit and I'm very clear. These children have already chosen. I'm writing a list, and next week I'll make sure that different children will choose. And then over the series of weeks, everyone will get a turn. And being really, really explicit about how I'm being fair makes things easier because they know, okay, I didn't get to turn today, but I will get a chance soon. And, acknowledging and saying it can be really disappointing when we don't get our turn, but everybody will get a turn over the time together. And so that's one thing that I do: manage expectations and write a list or make it explicit how you're being fair. And then another thing that I find really helpful is if I know that a particular child struggles, so 1 or 2 children in a class specifically struggle with this kind of situation and they will not cope well with waiting their turn, then I will try and ensure that that child does get what they would like, but without it being obvious that they have. Because other children will notice that, won't they? If you're always going, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to randomly pick a name. I know that Susie's going to cry if Susie doesn't get the zebra, for example. I don't teach anyone called Susie, so I'm not naming a child. So if you know Susie's going to get upset because she won't get a zebra. I'm not going to say, oh, Susie, here's the zebra automatically, because the other children will know, oh, she's being favorited. Oh, there's Susie again. And that doesn't do anything for the relationships in amongst the class. They all think that Susie's being preferred. And it doesn't help Susie either, because she believes I'm more important than everybody else. I'm being picked the first time, so not like that. But I found little ways around it. So, for example, I do have a child in one of my classes, not called Susie, but has a preference. And if ever I've got the soft toys out, this child particularly wants that one soft toy. And if she doesn't get it, she does get really, really upset. And so I figured out different ways of making sure that she gets to get that, but without her knowing that I've done that. So one way is I give out name cards. So I have the name cards in my hand, and it appears to everybody that that they're just in a pile, but I'll make sure that that child is near the top. And so when I'm handing out the name cards, they go and find a space, they go and sit down, and they go and sit where the soft toys are on the mats. And so that child will get their name, one of the top three, so that they will, it's highly likely that they will get to choose their preference of the soft toy. And nobody notices, nobody knows that that child has got one of the top choices, because they're all just waiting for their names to be called. And it may not be that she's the first person, she may be the second or third, but I'm usually picks people to go above her that I don't think are going to pick that particular toy. And so that's one way of doing it, through name cards. Another way of doing it would be making sure that your like high tariff children who struggle with these situations go first by calling a group. For example, you might notice all of those that you might notice somebody on a bench. You might say, this bench of children go to your mats first, and they get to choose where they're going to. Or you might say, if you have a letter U in your name, or a letter, so you pick something that is true for that child, but is also true for other children as well. So that child has got less time waiting and more sense of choice and more autonomy. And this isn't favoritism. This is just making a strategy that's going to work for everybody. Everybody's going to get a choice of where they sit, and everybody's going to get a choice of what they have. But the children that struggle the most are going to have the more access to more choice by the way that you've sent them to their benches, for example. And so, yeah, it's something that I found really, really works for me, so that child gets what they need to help them feel regulated, but it's not a really big deal, and other people aren't aware of it. And so those are some of the things that work really well for me. If during the lesson a child, none of your systems have worked, and a child is upset and they want a soft toy or a prop that someone else has got, like a colour that someone else has got, a coloured scarf, for example, or I wouldn't take something from someone else to appease someone else. So, for example, let's do Susie. Susie's upset because she hasn't got the zebra. Jack has got the zebra. I wouldn't expect Jack to give Susie the zebra. I would give Susie some other alternatives, but I would not be expecting another child to placate a child who's upset. So for me, that looks like, hey, Susie, do you want to come and look in my bag? I've got some other soft toys in there and you can pick from those. So Susie's getting more autonomy, more choice, but it's not impacting on another child, because that child still gets to have the zebra. There isn't, we don't want these children to feel like they're not important. And we also don't want our class completely derailed by a child not having not having a zebra. Can you tell I've been through this experience quite a few times? So Susie will get a chance to choose, and she'll have more choice because I'll have some spares in my bag, and I do always have spares in my bag in case this kind of thing arises. But I would never expect another child to give it up for that child, because that's just not cool, in my opinion. Okay, so that's my 4 things understand where the child is coming from, and reframe your, perhaps you might already get it, but it may need that you need a little bit more reframing of what's going on here for the child. Build relationships and trust with the child, communicate clearly and manage expectations about what they can expect, create some strategies that work for everyone. And then my last point is compassion. Have compassion for yourself in this process, because it doesn't feel good when we've got someone in our class who's having a meltdown. It can feel really upsetting, and we can hold a lot of like, oh, I didn't handle that well, or oh no, I just want everyone to be happy, or I don't like it that that person was upset, or you know, we all feel these, well, I do anyway, feel those feelings in my classes still now after such a long time. And so these things will happen. So hold compassion for yourself and hold compassion for everyone else in the situation too. So yeah, just remember that we're all human, and these things can happen to anyone. If you found that video useful, check out the other videos that I have here, all about behaviour management, and check out my training, Tame the Crowd Without Being Loud, which is all about understanding the psychology, the neuroscience behind children's behaviour, and it gives you some real simple practical tools and ways of managing behaviour within your classes to make your classes fun and calm, and all the things that you hope that your children's wellbeing lesson will be. I hope you found that useful, and if you've had any like aha moments or things that you found particularly interesting, or if you resonate with what I've said in any way, please do comment and let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching.